Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. I like to bid to our wonderful lecturer, Dr. Nabila, and all my fellow classmates. I am Aiman HAKIM bin Jalumin. Together with my friends, FARIS and DANIAL, will be presenting about Chapter 13 in Sociolinguistics, which is Language, Cognition, and Culture. So, what are we discussing in this chapter? This chapter tells us about the way a person speaks generally signals some social information about their background, such as their social class, ethnicity, age, and gender. Language may also strongly influence perception and behavior. Our first subtopic, which is language and perception. Questions come to mind. Does language reflect the social context in which it is produced, or does it convey a worldview of perspective? An example given in the textbook is a conversation between a lawyer and a rural guy. Was anybody with you in the boat? No, there weren't. Then what was that grandson of yours doing? Oh, him. He was with me. I thought you meant, was there somebody else that did not to have been there? So this conversation shows us that the language being spoken by the rural guy is what he perceived and he wanted to believe in. In contrast, the lawyer was having a different perception of the conversation. This shows that different people have different perception based on their language. So let's move on to our next topic, which is verbal hygiene. Now, what is verbal hygiene? Verbal hygiene is a phrase coined by British linguist Deborah Cameron in the first edition of her book, which was published in 1995. It is described as the urge to meddle in matters of language, which is the effort to improve and clean up language. An example of this is being politically correct. Some people think that some things should not be called certain things. For example, short people should not be called short people because it is found quite offensive. So, if you want to be politically correct, you should call them vertically challenged instead of calling them short. Same goes with the word ugly. The word ugly might come as offensive for most people. So, instead of saying ugly, you would say cosmetically different to be politically correct. Moving on to the next subtopic, which is Whorf. Now, what is Whorf? Sapir-Whorf hypothesis developed by Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf in 1929. Whorf came up with the hypothesis when he noticed that words selected to describe or label objects influenced people's perception and behavior. An example given in the textbook is a conversation between Frank and Bill. Don't throw your cigarette butts in there, it's dangerous. Why not? The label says empty. Well, there's no gasoline in them, but there's plenty of explosive vapor, so watch out. You see, people would smoke and throw their cigarette butts into gasoline drums labeled as empty, despite the fact that they were full of potential explosive vapor. This shows that words selected to describe or label objects influence people's perception and behavior. There are two forms of this hypothesis, which is the strong form and the weak form. The strong form of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is generally labeled linguistic determinism. This holds that people from different cultures think differently because of differences in their languages. The weak form of the hypothesis is linguistic relativity, that language influences perceptions, thought, and at least potentially behavior. In linguistic determinism, the categories provided by a language may favor certain ways of perceiving reality or the world, and make certain behaviors easier. For example, Korean and Chinese language has an easier numerical system than the English language. In grammar and cognition, grammatical categories such as tense, aspect, and gender encode aspects of reality differently in different languages. For example, English people and horses eat, while in German people ascend while horses fressen.
My name is AHMAD and I will be presenting on language categories and culture. This subtopic, we will be discussing about popular misconception about primitive languages, specifically Native American and Australian Aboriginal, which is always about simple societies can have complex grammars. But Kwakiutl, a Native American language, requires a grammatical classification of nouns based on whether they are visible or not. Also, from the Western perspective, the traditional nomadic lifestyle of the Aboriginal people of Australia seems very simple. However, their culture is thousands of years old and the language are amongst the most interesting and grammatically complex. For example, Kunwinchku has many more terms to label the differences among kangaroos and wallabies than English does. This animal seems very similar to the people outside of these Aboriginal people. It is because kangaroos and wallabies play a huge part in Kunjuku culture and environment. That's why they have more terms to distinguish between kangaroos and wallabies. This suggests an alternative to wolf position, which is rather than language determining what is perceived, it is the physical and socio-cultural environment which determines the distinctions that the language develops. This perspective also suggests that language provides a means of encoding a community's knowledge, beliefs, and values. For example, in Tahitian language, sadness equals sickness, which means attack by evil spirits. Tahitians don't make a distinction between sadness and sickness, that's why they're using the same word for both. It is because in their culture, sadness and sickness can be linked to an attack by evil spirits. Next, the cost of language loss. In October 1992, the last speaker of Ubich died. His name was Tefik Assange. Ubich is a language located in northwestern Caucasus and it's known for linguistically complex. Luckily, a French linguist, Georges Dumézil, managed to gather enough native speakers in the 1930s to describe the 81 consonants and 20+ verb prefixes of this language. Below is the phrase that Georges Dumézil was managed to describe. The phrase means, "If only you had not been able to make him take it all out from under me again for them." When we lose a language, we lose information which may be very difficult for other people outside of the language bubble to retrieve. For example, let's say, when Malay language died, people outside of Malay culture don't know what lemang is and how to cook it. Therefore, the people that is not familiar with lemang, they don't know how to cook it, and they don't know what should they put, and they don't know what type of bamboo should they use in order to make lemang.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ahmad and I'm going to be presenting to you on the next part. Okay, next we would have discourse pattern and culture. Discourse pattern would refer to how a person or in what manner does a person speaks, and culture is best defined by Tim Tommy 1999, who defines culture as a learned meaning system that consists of patterns of traditions, beliefs, values, norms, and symbols that are passed from one generation to another. Every culture have their own way of communicating. Let's see some example of that, which American speaks in a rather direct way, preferring to get straight to the point, while Japanese, on the other hand, would speak in an abstract manner, preferring to beat around the bush. Okay, when an American speaks, they speak in a way in which they tell you what they want and what their motive is. Japanese, on the other hand, would rather have you guessing what they want or what they want and what their motive is, in which if these two were to collide, it would create some kind of cultural shock. Okay, let's look at some example of that, shall we? Let's read the Japanese one first. The magazine Shincho will be put on sale tomorrow. When we compare it to the American counterpart, which says Time magazine will come out tomorrow. Get it at your newsstands. As you can see here, the American ads would have a verb, okay, which tells you what to do, and this in one way tell you what they want. They want you to buy it. While the Japanese ad would just say, okay, the product will be on sale tomorrow, and it would leave you rather thinking whether to buy it or not. Okay, they're not saying you should buy it, or neither did they would say that you should not buy it. For Japanese people, you must think of your you must think on your own whether to buy it or not. Whether American counterparts would seems a little more aggressive compared to it when they tell you they want you to buy it, go buy it. Next, we have language, social class, and cognition. Speaking manner based on social factors. As you can see, social factors will greatly influence the way a person would speak. Okay, social factors would include social class, race, gender, female or male, and identity. These factors would influence you on how you should speak. For example, in that we have in Malaysia is that royalties would speak according to their social class. Okay, when a commoner says tidur, royalty would say beradu. But when a commoner is speaking about royalty sleeping, they should say that the king is beradu. Okay, not tidur. Then the same applies to royalty as well. Royalty will not call a commoner sleeping tidur. Then we have bertita, which is to talk or inform, in which the commoner counterpart would be bercakap. And then for royalty, we have kering, which is sick, and for the commoner counterpart, it would be sakit. Then we have Japan, which is the method of speaking is strictly based on their gender, whether you are a male or female, feminine or masculine. First, if we have is me, the young version, which means what the boys and girls would use. For the feminine, it would be atashi, and the masculine counterpart of that would be boku. A boy would call himself boku, while a girl would call herself atashi. And then we have me for the older version, okay, which is what a woman or a man would use. Feminine would be atakshi, while the masculine counterpart would be ore. Have you. What the female would say is anata, and the masculine version of that is oh my. As you can see, the people in Japan are strictly have their strictly has their strict way of speaking to one another, whether you're male or female, and so does in Malaysia. When you're royalty, you must speak differently compared to commoners, and we have that in English aristocrats as well, in which aristocrats would consider their manner speaking to be more graceful than their commoner counterparts. So that's all from me. Thank you and Assalamualaikum.